Welcome to this week's episode. This is bonkers. We've got with us Robin Sharma. It does not get better than this. Honestly, this is an amazing conversation. He is one of the top 5 performance coaches in the world, helping people evolve, improve themselves all over the world, organizations, individuals. He has done it all. He's written some amazing books, The 5 a.m. Club, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. His recent book is amazing. The Everyday Hero Manifesto. Please check it out. We go deep, right? And there's heaps of grounded wisdom in this podcast about how to uplevel your life in really practical ways. Lists, structure of how to structure your week, how to structure your year, how to do things like organize yourself in advance to actually make things super easy so things are automated in your day-to-day life. There's all that sort of stuff in there, but there is actually at the heart of it the wisdom of how to weave your magic, how to live your magic, the magic that is truly you into the world. That is your greatness, right? Your deep inner work, unveiled, unyielding, completely abundantly poured out into the world. The wisdom is here in this podcast. Robin is a gem. Please tune in. Love this episode. Leave us your comments. Let us know what you're taking away from this conversation. I took away so much. And for those that are new to the podcast, please hit subscribe. Do us the honor. We love community around here. It'd be an honor to have you join us on this journey. And for those that have that moment where you go, I just had a moment where I completely broke through. Please hit the thumbs up at that moment on the video. It is such a pleasure to be on this path of service, helping you evolve. Stay inspired. Keep evolving. Enjoy this episode. Aside from my soul. Welcome to the Inspired Evolution, and it is an epic treat to be here today. We've got with us Robin Sharma. Robin, how are you, brother?
Great to be with you, Amrit.
It is such a pleasure to have you here. For those tuning into Robin for the first time, let me quickly do the honors. He is a celebrated leadership icon, trusted advisor to Fortune 100 companies, sporting legends all over the world, elite performers, industry titans, and as if that wasn't already enough, he's also a humanitarian. He founded the RSFC, the Robin Sharma Foundation for Children. He is considered one of the top 5 leadership experts in the world. He's internationally acclaimed as a best-selling author. He's sold over 20 million books. Check that out. You've definitely heard of The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. There is, in my circles, the personal development cult classic, The 5 a.m. Club. And he recently wrote, which is actually my favorite, The Everyday Hero Manifesto. We're going to dive deep into that. His list of clients includes Starbucks, Nike, GE, Microsoft, even NASA are using his leadership methods to drive growth and performance. Dude, thank you so much for doing this with us today.
Really a pleasure, Amrit. Thank you.
At the risk of sounding rude, I'm just going to go there straight out of the gate. Robin, are you giving up coaching? Because there is so much in this book, The Hero Manifesto. I have, as a coach, I love reading good books. I'm reading books all the time. I get 1 to 2, if I'm lucky, 3 to 4 ideas out of each book. This book is like, I'm going to go there, like Marcus Aurelius's Meditations for coaches. It is like, you can pick up, dude, it is ridiculous. Thank you so much for writing this book. My question still stands. Are you giving up coaching? Like, this book has that much going in it.
You know, it's funny. I did a mastermind call with one of my old friends last week, and he said the same thing. He said, make it a coaching curriculum, etc. But yes, I am getting away from coaching. I really love the artist life. I wrote the Everyday Hero Manifesto during 6 months of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And I just love the routine and the simplicity and the austerity of getting back to being a writer again. Mm-hmm. And so what I tried to do with the book is just put, almost everything that I've learned through life, through working with so many superstars, experiencing my tragedies and my trials. And I just, basically I wanted to, in 400 pages, I wanted to put some very rich, thoughtful philosophies, methodologies, and tools that would really serve people, not only in their productivity and worldly success, but in their spiritual evolution and dealing with difficulties. So the book stands on its own and people can use it as they wish.
Absolutely. And I think it covers, like you alluded to, it covers so much ground in 400 pages. And I'm not just saying that. Please do yourself a favor, check it out. I found myself, I couldn't get past certain chapters. It was like this chapter, repeat, repeat, repeat. 29, there's a chapter on peak productivity strategies. It is a gospel. Like, if you are, like, trust me, if you're a coach, this is everything you've ever gone out of your way to learn and then some, and you can just build your whole empire based on applying these strategies. And then there's 40 lessons that you wish you would have learned before 40. Each of those nuggets of wisdom is pure dynamite. You can literally, like I said, Marcus Aurelius Meditations, take away each one of those each morning, go and think about it. It's enough to sort of keep you going for ages. And then there's all the practicalities, like there's little parables, little stories that you can go away and unpack, whether it's on trauma, whether it's your spirituality, whether it's high performance, whether it's helping out a friend. There's so much ground that you cover in there. Thank you so much. I want to ask you a question that has always been burning in my heart ever since I've been following your work. Is there's a word often that I find, we associate with the people that we respect and we look up to. And there's a word that I associate with yourself, and hopefully you're okay with me pairing this with you, is the word legacy. And I wanted to tune in and sort of see, what does legacy mean to yourself? And if so, after that, potentially, what do you think is your legacy?
It's a fascinating question, Amrit. And I wrote a book about 25 years ago called Who Will Cry When You Die? And that book was very much about legacy. You mentioned Marcus Aurelius. In Meditations, he talks about the tongues of prosperity, not prosperity, the tongues of, what's the word? The tongues of, anyway, he speaks to the fact that, so often we live our lives to be revered after we're dead. And there's a lot of talk these days about legacy. And I used to, as I suggest from the book I wrote years ago, was like, I used to really believe in it. I used to write about make your mark, the old Joseph Campbell idea that, to live in the hearts of those we leave behind is never to die, make your mark on history. But if you look at one of the last chapters of the Everyday Hero Manifesto, and I'm sure you've read it, I actually say that don't worry about your legacy.
I know.
I think right. And now I think at the age I'm at, I believe legacy is a fool's sport. I believe legacy is nothing more than about, the ego's chatter, because no matter how long we get to live, we will all end up as a pile of dust in an urn, maybe next to someone's little league trophies over their fireplace mantle. And the kings and queens get buried next to the unknowns. And so why worry about how you'll be remembered when you're dead? Because we will be dead. And I think it's much more important to live while you're alive. So to answer your question, I don't care about my legacy. I don't think about legacy. I encourage people not to worry about their legacy. While you are blessed to live, produce your monuments if that's attractive to you. Do your spiritual growth if that's what fuels your jam. Live the life you want to live. Honor your promise, and don't worry about your legacy.
Thank you so much for sharing that, brother bear. Really, really, really appreciate that. In there's a piece that really stands tall for me, is there is still the hero's journey that we are all living through. And there is such a narrative from the outside looking in. Obviously, there is so much projection in what I'm about to do, but nonetheless, I'm going to go there is from someone that's having, coach, literally, you are one of the top 5, advisors for performance coaches in the world. So in that perspective, like growing something, so I want to use the word monumental, but something so epic, let's just call it that. The identity pieces that we all have to behold in order to grow ourselves. And there's going to be some topics in identity I want to unpick with you today. But that, and then learning to even what you've just described, to shed that, dude, the amount of work, inner work that must take. Can we just have a minute to hear about building all of that up and then surrendering all of that as well?
Well, so I want to make sure I understand your question. And I think you're suggesting I built something and that requires an identity, and then to let it go and not be concerned about legacy requires the dismantling of an identity.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's my question.
So, the first thing is the most honest thing I'd say to you is I'm just on my journey. I don't know
Mm,
if I've completely dismantled my worldly identity, because
mm,
that would mean shedding my ego, and that would mean I'm enlightened, and I am absolutely far from that. I'm
mm,
just on my path. One thing I really believe in service.
mm,
So I work to serve. I stood in Nelson Mandela's prison cell a number of years ago. My life changed. I listened to the guide who walked me into the present prison cell, who had served with him for 7 years, I believe. And I said, "What was Nelson Mandela like?" And he said, "That man was a humble servant."
mm,
And so, I really believe if we could be humble servants while we get to live,
mm.
if we could use our days to create magic and value for people, that's a beautiful thing. So I whatever I've built, it's in the spirit of service. It's also in the spirit of honoring my craft. It's also in the spirit of seeing how far of my promise and potential I can materialize why I live. I'm not so concerned with, in the Everyday Hero Manifesto, I say, uh, JPF, joy, peace, and freedom, is always more valuable than FFA, fame, fortune, and applause. So
Mm.
what I do in the world is not for FFA, fame, fortune, and applause. It's more for joy, peace, and freedom. And yes, I mean, I do try to let go. I think if you're concerned with fame, fortune, and applause as you build your brand or build your business, then your energy and your genius and your attention and your time is off the work that will actually give you the fame, fortune, and applause that so
Mm.
many people are seeking.
Isn't that a trip, isn't it? It's like the humility that was required to be in service. And it's weird. I love even just being in service, because humility and service, that's such a good combination of words together, because in order to be in service, you've got to humble yourself. You can't be the master and be in service or be humble. Like it's this weird sort of dynamic, right? So humble service, love that. And the key thing that I find in there is it's so challenging for the ego to wrap its head around that potentially is my path of greatest ease, path of greatest flow, potentially even my path of greatest prosperity comes from like dropping the guard of the ego and dropping FFA and stepping more into joy, into freedom. Yeah, like that's such a it feels so counterintuitive for the mind.
Yes, I think the place where your greatest fears live is the place where your greatest freedom lies.
Mm,
I believe joy is our GPS.
mm,
I believe instinct is so much more powerful than our intellect.
mm,
So if we exercise the bravery to trust the silent whispers of our highest selves, and I know that sounds inspirational and perhaps metaphysical, but it's been truthful to me.
mm,
If we have the bravery to trust those silent whispers, which our intellect, the voice of reason says that's crazy, but if we go there, that's where our magic lives. My backstory is I come from very humble beginnings, Amrit, and people didn't give me much of a chance. The second chapter of the Everyday Hero Manifesto, for the first time, details everything I've gone through and the lessons I
everything.
learned from it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, this book is the most vulnerable book I've shared because I do want to serve, and I think when I share my vulnerability and my frailties and the difficulties I've gone through, like that chapter about the time 10 years of my journals vanished
Yeah,
and taught me to
disappeared.
let go, I think it helps people. But
Yeah.
I come from very humble beginnings. I wasn't given much of a chance. I was discouraged a lot.
Mm,
I talk in that second chapter about some of the mentors who saw something in me that no one else saw. I became a litigation lawyer. I was successful in the world, but very empty within myself.
mm,
I got an instinct to eventually write a book based on my journey and struggles and uh, trying to figure out how I could live a happier life, a life of more service, a life of more inner peace and freedom. And I wrote this book that you mentioned, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. I self-published it. Mom was my first editor. My
mm.
first seminar, 23 people attended. 21 of those people were my family members. So I just trusted my instinct, even though it made no sense to do
Mm.
so whatsoever. And it opened up a whole new universe that's led me down a completely different path. And I think that's really important to do, but it's hard to do.
Yeah, can we talk about it being hard to do when it comes to instinct? Because I pair a lot of instinct with intuition, but it seems like in today's world, we we are less inclined to be open to such said forces. It's almost like the mind takes this real precedence. It like science. It's going to be based on hard facts, the kind of gut instinct stuff. What do you think is like? How do we tune into it better? Is actually fundamentally at the heart of the question that I want to ask you. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I don't know if most people are still resisting instinct, because, as you know, there's this the big quit. So many people are leaving their city, leaving
Mm,
cities. So many people are leaving their jobs. So many people are trusting their instinct. So many people are walking into the unknown. So many
mm,
people are taking chances because who knows what tomorrow is going to bring. So I think
mhm.
people are trusting
More.
that silent voice within much more. But
Mm,
you're absolutely right. We live in a world that trusts mathematics more than philosophy and magic.
mm,
And so how do we start to honor our magic and follow our intuition? And this is not a soft subject. This is a hard subject. This is for
mm,
entrepreneurs. I mean, you look at some of the greatest entrepreneurs in the world. Like, I think of Steve Jobs. He was so intuitive.
mm,
He was so connected with where the world was going versus where it was. He was such a possibilitarian and visionary. But if you were to ask me, how do we hear more of who we truly are, so that
mm,
we can honor our promise, I'd say number one, journaling is a very powerful methodology.
mm,
Before I got on with you, I journaled.
mm,
Getting quiet. I call it the three S's: silence, solitude, and stillness. Sometimes even just getting into a room alone with a yellow pad of paper is
mm,
powerful, where you just write out. Um, Prayer is incredibly powerful.
mm,
Some entrepreneurs will say, "What? Like prayer? Come on,
mm,
you're supposed to be a hard hitting elite performance leadership advisor." But personally, I find every prayer is heard,
mm,
and thy will be done is a very powerful prayer. Meditation is a great way to tune into your intuition as well.
mhm.
Nature. I mean, I for the past 25 years, almost every afternoon after work, I go on a nature walk.
Yeah.
And we could get into the neurobiology and the fact that, when you get out into nature, your prefrontal cortex, which is the seat of your reason and the crown jewel of reasoning, starts to shut down, and you go from beta down to alpha down to theta states around
Mm,
nature and
mm,
quietude, and that's when you can start to hear your truth. So those are
mhm,
some of the strategies. But I think, as entrepreneurs, the more we can stop following the crowd, the more
mm,
we can ask ourselves a fundamentally game changing question, which is, what magic and value can I deliver that no one else has the bravery or the insight and acumen to deliver to the marketplace? And even though no one else is delivering it,
mm.
I'm going to bring on that magic to my stakeholders and consumers, so that you breed originality into the marketplace and serve a deep hunger. That's where your empire lies.
Mm. I love that because it speaks so much to the creative force within us, right? And it's it always captures me that we are ourselves, and this is that interesting philosophical piece that we are created in the likeness of God, and it's quite a statement. But humbly, the place where I can connect to it is like our ability to create, and we are ourselves creations. Whoa. It's like it's a pretty big blessing to be creative. And similar to like people dialing down their intuition, you said like the big quit, I think it is really in effect. And actually, thank you for highlighting that for us, because I think more and more people are taking on creative ventures as well and exploring their creativity and saying, you know what, I've always wanted to open up that bar or I've always wanted to try this. One of my coaching clients, she's been a tax auditor for, and nothing wrong with tax auditors, but pretty mundane job for 25 years. And she's literally just started making pottery. It's become a whole thing. And she started an Instagram page. She's got tens of thousands of followers making pottery now. She's always wanted to, and she never did it, thanks to this time. And I think creativity is really this amazing blessing that we're afforded in this lifetime. The thing I wanted to ask you about creativity is, can we have a riff on the vitality that creativity brings you into your life. When you're not being creative, you're not as healthy, right? Can you explain that to us a little?
Well, absolutely. I just, first of all, I'd say we're all artists. We
Mm.
are all born into genius, and then we become brainwashed and heart washed into average.
Mm.
And one of the early chapters of the Everyday Hero Manifesto talks exactly about the process and explains how we can reclaim our genius. And one of the stories I share is, many years ago in ancient Thailand, there was a golden Buddha that the monks used to worship. I mean, it was this massive Buddha monument that was made of pure gold.
Mm.
And then it became very clear that foreign invaders were going to attack the nation, and there was a chance that the golden Buddha would be stolen.
Right.
So the inhabitants came up with this idea to cover it with layer upon layer upon layer of soil so that the warriors would not steal this precious monument. And sure enough, when the warriors came in, they saw this mountain of mud and they went right by it.
They missed
Many
it.
years later, they missed it. So many years later, a young monk saw this mountain of mud that people had walked by for many years, but there was a glimmer of gold shining through it. And I've
Mm.
actually been to the Golden Buddha, and in the book, I show the picture. And so he got his companions, and they started moving away upon layer upon layer upon layer, only to find at the end of the day there was this massive, priceless golden Buddha. And I think that's a profound metaphor for all of us as human beings.
Mm.
We are born into this artistry. Amrit. We are born into incredible creativity. We are born into love. We are born into bravery. We are born not into egotism, but heroism.
Mm.
And so, but what happens is from the early programming of our caregivers and our teachers and the media and our peers, we become brainwashed to forget who we truly are. And we lose the connection with our curiosity. I noticed you did a podcast where you did speak about curiosity, and we lose that curiosity.
Mm.
And then we wake up at 30, 40, 50, and we're saying, we're successful in the world, or maybe we're not successful in the world, but we've lost our sparkle in our eyes. We've lost our curiosity. We've lost the sense. I know you are so focused on purpose. We've lost our purpose. And so the inner work you speak of to reclaim our genius really is moving through those layers of brainwashing, hard programming, emotional trauma that have caused us to create a case or layers of mud that lie over our light, our genius, and our truth. And you're right, once we start to move through that through the inner work, then we get this, there's an immediate payoff. As soon as you move through some of that programming and do this healing, immediately there's more vitality. Immediately there's more creativity. Immediately there's more bravery to stand in your own skin. Immediately there's more connection with your intuition. Immediately there's more sense of yourself.
Mm. Can I ask you? Thank you so much for sharing that. I love your responses. I live for them. One of the questions I want to ask is, and this is a bit of well, this is one for me, maybe not so much for the audience, but is there a more nobler path potentially than actually the creativity we dive into in actually consciously creating our own life? I know I'd love for the audience for you to share your big five if you're okay with that, and also highlighting to the audience that family is such a big part of that for yourself as well. Like, you've been, touch wood, so successful, and but like front and center in so much of that has been your family, and just to see beauty in the everyday things. And sorry, I'm sharing your big five for you now. Pardon me. But yeah, just like actually consciously creating our life, like just the like just that like is there a bigger, is there something even more noble than that? Like I really feel like there is just so much dimensionality to that path and in that walk. Your thoughts on that, and potentially your big five, if you could share that with us as well.
Sure. And first, I just want to sincerely applaud you for your great questions. I don't always get such thoughtful questions, and even for your spirit and your laugh and your smile. I mean, like
Thanks,
it's
brother.
just it just makes me smile. And if the world was like you, I think it'd be a much brighter place. It's
So
just a
true.
pleasure. It's a pleasure looking at the screen and seeing you laugh.
Thank you.
It sort of brings tears to my eyes. It's just it probably speaks to the inner work you've done to radiate that. Well, there's a lot of pundits that and entrepreneurial gurus, and I'm in no way minimizing them at all, but their philosophy is, rise, hustle and grind. If you're not monomaniacally focused on your ambition, you're never going to get it done. And we have examples of that. I guess Steve Jobs, it looked like his whole life was his mountaintop. There's many entrepreneurial icons. Their work is their life, and that's not my experience. I believe, and I'm not saying I'm an entrepreneurial icon. I'm just saying I believe you can fulfill your ethical ambitions while also experiencing daily beauty, while enjoying the fruits of your labor, of course, while honoring your family and having amazing meals and experiences with them. I think you can be a massive success financially and in business, and not lose your spirituality. As a matter of fact, grow your spirituality. As a matter of fact, you'll be even more successful if you find a cause that's higher than yourself that becomes the focus of your business. I mean, then you don't get knocked down. You're so spiritually invested in service that when you get knocked down, you go, well, I have no choice but to continue. And your products reflect your state of love for the people you are blessed to serve. I'm going to repeat that again because it's so important. If you really fall in love with service versus egoism and what's in it for me, then your products and services, your apps, your books, your films, your whatever you sell to the marketplace, it's a testimony to the love that you have for the people that are putting food on your table. And people feel that love. So, you mentioned my big five. This is a concept I talk about in the Everyday Hero Manifesto. It's part of the peak productivity pyramid. And you said it's so powerful. It's because that's the pyramid that I've taught to the billionaires that I've been mentoring for 26 years.
It shows, man.
And it's helped them. It's not something I came up last week.
Yeah, dude.
They have told me it's been revolutionary for them.
At the risk of interrupting you, like each of those concepts unto themselves is a whole coaching Bible unto its own, unto itself. It's like, go away, implement this. There you go. That you could literally set an intention every year behind each one of those and just invest in your business, go that direction. It's like, there's 9 years worth of work right there in like a chapter. Anyway, it's amazing. Please read the book. Chapter 32 or 29, I think it is. Yeah.
And even my friend who I mentioned in the mastermind last week said the chapter on the 13 hidden traits of the billionaires I've mentored, he said that's a book right there. Yeah. So anyway, I think the point that we're leaning towards is the fact that this big five concept, which I learned in South Africa. I went on a safari, and the guide said to me, we're going to go look for the big five: the lion, water buffalo, elephant, and two others. Yeah. And I went back to my hotel room that night, and I asked myself, however long I'm blessed to live, what are my big five? What are the five Mount Everest that I want to climb for the rest of my life? And and then I do my annual big five and my quarterly big five, and I explain the process in the Everyday Hero Manifesto. But part of my big five for this year, and it's been pretty steady, but it's family, it's personal mastery, and it includes beauty, because I'm an aesthete. The French have a term called aesthete, a lover of beauty. What's the point of being successful but missing out on beauty? And I think we can have it all if we learn how to. And how people will say, well, how can we have it all? One of the big keys is being masterful at weekly scheduling.
It's amazing that it has to be like, when we start to think about some of those things, even like one of the most brilliant productivity tools is literally like writing lists. And it sounds so mundane, so simple. And like, but when you get into the art of it, it's like, holy shit, I took something that was completely in the ether and put ink to paper, and it materialized. we just stop to look at it for a second, it's actually pretty miraculous. Like, and they're powerful. Lists are powerful. Like you said, like, you know, there's a whole art to just calendaring, like taking time to schedule your week.
Well, vague ambitions lead to vague results.
Mm.
So a lot of people, you say, what are your goals for this year? What are your HVTs, high value targets? Well, I want to be healthier and I want to make more money. Those there's no precision. And then they wonder why they get vague results.
Mm-hmm.
So running through the process I talked about in the book called the weekly design system, it does a few things. Number one, habit researchers and willpower researchers call it a pre-commitment strategy. So when you go through the process where you end up with a schedule for your week that not only includes your business commitments and your creative commitments, but also your meditation time, your family time, your prayer time, your nature walks, it all goes on a weekly schedule. That is a pre-commitment strategy, which elevates your willpower and your energy to get it done. Number two, the very fact of journaling or writing out your week, it causes you to go through a cognitive process where you're translating what your intentions, but they're fuzzy. And the process of putting vocabulary in written form to it is a process of creating precision and clarity. And our daily behavior always reflects our beliefs and our thinking.
Can I ask you a question? It's well, sorry, I'm calm down. You're in an interview, probably. Clarity. It's something that is just, it's stunning how empowering it really can be. And it's something I know through your work you've afforded again and again and again for so many people. And like, it's, as a coach, I think you sort like, I start to sort of identify as my whole job now is just clarity and communication. Clarity and communication. It's fundamentally the two things that I'm up to with the greatest responsibilities, probably the chops of my trade, I guess. How, like, I want to understand, how do you consistently up level your identity? How do you continuously afford yourself greater and greater clarity on what it is? It seems like the big five are very heartfelt and very, they're not very metric driven, but they're very intentional. And so that clarity that you afforded yourself, that these are your big five, like that level of clarity of going that deep, that's a consequence of the inner work, or how do you like encourage that clarity for others?
Well, I mean, okay, so each year at the end of the year, I spend roughly 2 weeks planning the next year.
Wow.
And some people, you know, especially spiritualists, they might say that sounds very rigid. A weekly plan sounds very rigid. Someone once said to me at a seminar I was delivering, they said, "Let planning be your springboard, so spontaneity can be your splash."
It's
And
beautiful.
if you do planning properly, I know, and I know it's not the sexiest topic, but it's really fundamental to getting great things done. But and
Absolutely.
I know you'd probably want to move on to more interesting
No.
topics, and I'd love
This
to,
is
and I'd
this
love to. But I think, you know, I think I'm gonna. If you look at someone who has a lot of freedom and a lot of free time, those are people who've planned very, very well.
Mhm.
And in the Everyday Hero Manifesto, for one of the contrarian methods that I've shared with many of the most successful people in the world that I share in the book is the 5 great hours rule.
Yeah.
And so if you schedule 5 great hours and you have the right ecosystem and there's no distraction, all the things that I talk about, because usually it takes someone maybe even a week to get 5 beautiful, magical, intense, genius grade hours of work
Hours in.
done.
Yeah.
It might take a week.
Yeah.
So if you learn how to do five, if you schedule 5 great hours, 8 o'clock to 2 o'clock, 5 days a week, and you turn off your devices and you get into your Menlo Park that I talk about in the book, and your tight bubble of total focus and do all that, well, then you're finished work at 2 o'clock if you're an entrepreneur. And
Yeah.
that allows you to spend the afternoon with your family, going to an art gallery, mountain biking, praying, get a massage, you know, journaling, doing whatever you want to do. So I think being intentional and being structured is actually the DNA or the gateway into an incredible amount of freedom. I have so much free time because I schedule really, really well. And when I work, I am like a man on fire. I am indistractable. But when I am finished, I'm with, 3-hour meals with my family. I'm relaxed. I'm applying the 2 massage protocol that I talked about. Air calories.
Loitering, I think is one of the words that was in the book.
Yeah, loitering. You're so perceptive. That was the Indian painter. And he just said, most of my day, he goes, I paint for a while, and then I believe it's important to loiter around a lot. And I love it. Like, you've got to loiter around and let your ideas and inspiration incubate, because that's how you become a great artist, right?
Oh, such a beautiful way of putting it. But just the way you described it is all the moral responsibility to loiter. It's like, yeah, man, I'm getting it.
Japanese novelist Haruki Murakami said, when I'm not writing my book is when I'm writing my next book. And that's why it's incredibly important, if you want to be a world-class domain leading entrepreneur, here's one of the secrets. You've got to rest a lot. You've got to take a lot of time off, so that when you work, your ideas are genius grade, and you are not eroding the 5 assets of genius I talk about, including your cognition, your creativity, and your energy.
In there, one of the big takeaways from the book, which is actually, thank you so much for calling this out, because we do talk a lot about mindset in the personal development space. And there's this whole, like, the spirit set, and you go there, right? We talk about mindset, we talk about heart set, we talk about soul set, but then it's like, health set. Don't forget about health set. And it's your physical body. And there's such this key thing where it's like, when you are in a really good condition, you are more creative, you feel better. And like, we've all experienced it. You go to the gym, the endorphin rush is legit. The 2WW, I love that. The second wind workout, going for walks in nature, I'm on board. My dog thanks you for it. But legit, like the health set piece to it. Like, and like you said, some of this stuff is grounded, and it's a bit maybe too grounded for some people, but legit, like having like a healthy body, how, like, the importance of that for our path, for our creativity, for our business, even like having healthy body subsequent to business. Some people would be like, I don't have time to go to the gym. What do you say to something like that?
Those who don't make time for exercise must eventually make time for illness. It's an old saying. Someone handed me a piece of paper at a leadership event I delivered in Qatar. And he said, read it in your hotel room tonight. And on it, it said, health is the crown on the well person's head that only the ill person can see. So exercise will cost you a lot of time, and productivity. Death will cost you a bit more, I think. And so I'd say, and just to offer context, yes, in the personal development field, so many people talk about mindset. And everything is mindset. With all respect, I don't agree with that. I think mindset is incredibly important. Mindset is our psychology. We must purify our beliefs. So we think prosperity, so we think elite performance, so we don't live in the past. Mindset is important. But then there's a second interior empire that I talk about in the book, which is your heart set. We're not just our minds and our psychology, we're also our emotionality. If we are dealing with shame and guilt and anger and sorrow, and I'm going to make a link that not many people, that you don't hear about it very often, but if you are dealing with that emotional baggage, that is one of the biggest reasons you're not intimate with your creativity or your productivity. And then there's not only the first empire of mindset and the second of heart set, there's health set, which is our physicality. And then there's the fourth interior empire that you want to calibrate to get to world-class performance. And that's our soul set. That's just cleaning out the ego, so we connect with our higher power. And if we really were connected with our higher power, we would be the greatest force in the world. And so on the health set point, you're right. If anyone who's watching wants to multiply their performance and their prosperity exponentially, one of the quickest ways to do it is hire a trainer, get you into the gym at 5 o'clock, or start running at 5 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock, and do sweaty exercise first thing in the morning. And we could get into the neuroscience, like the brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which accelerates cognition. It releases Sweaty exercise in the morning releases dopamine, the inspirational neurotransmitter. It reduces cortisol, the fear hormone. It releases serotonin, which makes you feel happier in this troubled world. It releases norepinephrine, which gives you focus in a world of digital distraction. It goes on and on and on. It allows you to combat stress dramatically. Getting super fit is an absolute game changer for any entrepreneur. It's like one of the top things you could possibly do.
And it's so easy to implement, yet, like it's not talked about. That's the thing that really got me, was like, 3 days a week, get someone, hire a subscription, just go. And I think that is one of the other grounded pieces in the book that I absolutely love. Now, this is going to sound a bit indulgent for those that are not on the same page, but hear me out. You prescribe 2 massages a week, but it could be anything. It doesn't have to be the massages, right? It could be anything, like, hiring a personal trainer, fitness, but it's pay for it up front. Book yourself in, like commit yourself up front to the strategy. You had a pretty word for it. I've forgotten what it is, but commit yourself up front to the strategy. So then now you've just kind of got to plug and play because you've already made the commitment to yourself from that inspired moment. That's actually one of the things that I've leveraged so well at the moment, like over the last year or so, is just, okay, I'm inspired now. I may not be inspired next month. How do I lock myself in from this moment of inspiration into that for my future self? And it's like 6 months, sign up, go weekly, reach out, let them know you're going to be doing weekly, get them to hold you accountable. Now you're in. Can you tell us a little bit about that process?
Absolutely. So you just identified one of the number one reasons people have these mighty ambitions that never get traction. And there's the moment of inspiration where we say, yes, I'm going to run the marathon. Yes, I'm going to write the book. Yes, I'm going to build a billion-dollar company. Yes, I'm going to work towards spiritual enlightenment. And after that moment of inspiration, we all go through the desert of creative desolation, where the inspiration goes down and we start to have to do the hard work. And then most of us give up after a week or two, and we actually judge ourselves and create shame and say, well, I guess I'm not the kind of person who could install habits that last.
All these self-defeating stories. Yeah, man.
It's very right. And then we say we're not good enough. We add more shame, more guilt. We beat ourselves up more. And then eventually we just, we escape through digital distraction because we don't want to get traction on any of our dreams. The tactic that you're talking about in the Everyday Hero Manifesto is one that has worked so well with my clients. And it's called the Forced Optimization Strategy, FOS.
That's what it's called.
And essentially it's, right? So if you want to apply the 2 massage protocol, if you want to join the 5 a.m. club, one of my earlier books, well, what you do is you pull out your credit card and you call your local gym and you find a great trainer that is aligned with you. And you say, here's my credit card number and book me in for the next 3 months, 5 o'clock in the morning, come to my house or meet me in a park, or I'll meet you at the gym, and you're locked and loaded. And then you force yourself to get to the gym, and then you allow the magic of neuroplasticity and habit installation to take over. And then you get to a place after a few months where you're at what habit researchers call the point of automaticity, where it actually becomes easier to do the new habit than not to do the new habit because you have forced optimized it. And this is not about having money. You could do it with a friend, a support group, and say, let's do this habit together 3 times a week. You schedule it. Now you've got some commitment.
I want to ask another question. Thank you so much for sharing that. I love that. FOS, that's the acronym. I was like, yeah, knew it. So action delayed is greatness betrayed. We're on that riff. We're in that sort of slipstream. I think there's a perfect sort of segue to drop into there. I love that because oftentimes one of the things I find myself saying again is like more is lost to indecision than wrong decision. But the way you coined this, I was just like, action delayed is greatness betrayed. Please unpack that for us because that is powerful.
Well, in one of the later chapters, I shared the story. I was on a highway in traffic, and there was a gentleman in a convertible car, and he was, let's say elderly. And I looked at his license plate, and it was some, what did it say in the book? It was something like "make time for fun" or something like that. And I just find a lot of people, what they do is they postpone traveling. They postpone reading the great books. They postpone finding true love. They postpone, building the businesses they want. They postpone their portfolio of passions until sometime in the future. And that is a great recipe for heartbreak. And, I was reading, yeah, tell me.
Well, I was actually coaching someone just after having read that part of the book. And again, this is this is literally how it went. She had two daughters, and she wanted to go on this trip to Italy from the US. And she was putting this whole idea of going to Italy off. It was just like, you know what, like my daughter's 7 and 9, it's too hard. It's too hard right now. And the conversation that we ended up having was like, but I've just, been riffing on this idea out of the book, action delayed is greatness betrayed. Just stop for a sec. Like delaying and waiting for them to get older to be able to go on a trip with you. Don't you think instilling the adventure in them early on would be such like a great experience for them, for yourself, the memories, your family? And then come full circle by the end of the call, we were booked, we were off, right? And I was like, yes, this is going to be an incredible holiday. So, but even just that, like we park things because like you said, we get in our head about things and we sort of go, and then a million excuses appear as to why that couldn't or couldn't work, why it's a good idea, why it's not. But giving it the bandwidth to go, actually, if I do this now, it actually could be something really special. And who knows what tomorrow holds, right?
Yes, I would say our excuses are nothing more than the lies our fears have sold us. I would also say it's too hard is the war cry of a heart that will be broken by regret at the end of a life. So, if we recite our excuses, it's too hard. And I'm aware of the context in the world right now. Not everyone can travel. There's all these restrictions for many countries, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the larger point that we're discussing is we recite our excuses so many times that we actually seduce ourselves to think they're true. And it's too hard. It's such a common one. It's too hard to take little kids to Italy. I mean, what I have witnessed is there's so many people that do not take the trip of a lifetime until they're too old to do it, and then they're too old to enjoy it. And so I think you're right about let's not postpone things. But you talk about indecision, and I want to make a little nuance that is kind of unorthodox because right, yes, in the book I say action betrayed or action postponed is genius betrayed, delayed. Right. Okay. And I subscribe to that. Having said that, here's the nuance. There are periods of our lives where we are not meant to do anything. There are periods of our lives where we are meant. I know you've got a very philosophical audience, a spiritually grounded audience. So there are periods of our lives, call it the dark night of the soul or the light night of the soul, where we are meant to not know the answers to our biggest questions, because this is part of our process of becoming the people who will eventually be able to hold the answers to our biggest questions. So I don't think that rising to world class and personal mastery is a linear sport. There are times in my life where I'm an elite performer, where I am like running all my rituals. I am getting up at 4:15 in the morning, et cetera, uber productive, et cetera. And then, then I go into, after, like, for example, I spent 16 months writing the Everyday Hero Manifesto. I gave my heart and soul to it. You saw what I put into it. Now I'm in a place where it's a bit, it's like, it's a different routine. It's a different season. And so all I'm suggesting is, there are times to be an elite performer, and there are times to know the answers to your biggest questions. There are times to execute on your ethical ambitions. And there are times to recover and be confused or just not be as much of a performer. And as I mentioned in the book, there's a big difference between worldly productivity and spiritual productivity. I used to beat myself up when I was going through one of those fallow seasons, which is actually the time of greatest spiritual growth. I'm going like, I'm not as productive as I usually am. Yes, but spiritual productivity is even more valuable.
I I love that. I feel like almost like we're like a condor. Like there's the philosophical conversation that we ground and then we could take back off and then we ground. And so and the risk at the inspiration to sort of go back up into the conversation philosophically, the conversation is potentially around us developing more acceptance for the seasons that we go through without having to place the expectations of our ego and infusing that into it. And I see this a lot, pummeling ourselves with our expectations, man. It is such a thing I've witnessed. There's a way that there's a phrase that you wrote in the book that I actually wrote down in my journal. Having faith larger than fears. Is that one of the places we can gain more acceptance? Can you potentially provide some advice in terms of how to accept the seasons of our lives a little bit more? I know it's super philosophical, but please.
No, I love it. It's a fantastic question, and I'm smiling because life will break you down until you eventually learn to accept the seasons. How do you get there? How do you get there? How have I got there? And I still have a long way to go. How have I got to acceptance? Suffering, suffering. You know, Rumi said it really well. He said, keep breaking your heart, keep letting your life break your heart over and over again until it opens up. So through struggles and kicking and screaming against where the muse and my higher power was leading me, I'm learning more and more to be at peace with the seasons. I call them in my methodology the twin cycles of elite performance. There is the high excellence cycle when you are firing on all cylinders and running your protocols and uber productive in the world and breeding your genius into the marketplace. And then if you trust the muse or your higher power, there's often a period of incubation and recovery and rest and transformation. And if you can actually have the power, it's not weak. This conversation, it's, you know, sometimes people apologize. Sorry to be philosophical. This is the heavyweight conversation. And if you can go into those, right? If you can go into those deep recovery cycles, those are the cycles that not only allow you to heal and release the lower vibration and heal the trauma and release the guilt and the shame and the ego. But what's the result of that? It's not only you wake up and evolve, but what would that do to your work? See, people often there's no connection between spiritual healing and elite performance and entrepreneurial success. I know you get it. You evangelize it, but as you heal and become more honest, more brave, more connected to your higher power, more trusting of your own unique creativity, more intimate with your own gifts and your talents, then you go out in the world and every product you create, every teammate you mentor, every client you connect with, everything that you do reflects your whole new level of authentic power versus worldly power. The more intimate you become with your magic, we all have magic. The more magic you can shine into your marketplace. And the marketplace pays handsomely for magicians.
I love the way you put that. And I was smiling because it was my 11-year anniversary actually yesterday. And we were sitting at dinner and we were having this really interesting conversation about this one year where my wife took a sabbatical and she traveled the world, and I joined her a little bit on the sabbatical for the initial part, and then I came home. But in many ways, it was a sabbatical for myself as well, because how often are you 6 years in a partnership, and all of a sudden you become very one in a family, and then all of a sudden you're like your own energy, and you start realizing, oh, holy shit, I am the messy one. And certain things like this. I was always blaming her. And then realizing, actually, no, I'm the one that's really good at nurturing relationships. She's really good at sparking them, and like all these little bits and pieces dropped in. But that was actually the year the Inspired Evolution was birthed. It was the year she connected to the guitar and music as like a whole piece for her. And taking that time off, like exactly, and that's why I was just smiling ear to ear, because we were literally having this conversation about how important it was to take that year off And just, we were so afraid. We were having literally an existential crisis when this happened, right? But when that year off gave us so much in terms of its bounty, touch wood, that the whole idea that you're prescribing to, which you're sharing with us, which is, hey, take some time to rest. That spiritual, like allowing things to settle, let the dust settle, shake the cobwebs off, and the things that'll be inspired to grow. I'm still running on the fumes of the inspired evolution, like touch wood, blessings. And it all came from taking that a little bit of time off and taking a little bit of recovery time to sort of let the things settle, to sort of see what wants to be birthed. So before I let you go, sorry, go
last
on.
Friday,
Yeah, go on. Sorry.
yeah, I was just reflecting on what you said. And last Friday, I took my son to see Michelangelo's David,
Oh,
and in Gallery Academia.
yeah.
And you probably know the story, but right next to David in the gallery, what probably the most famous sculpture in the world, a genuine masterpiece.
Yeah.
There's a little panel that explains that Michelangelo took a discarded piece of marble. No one wanted the piece of marble, and he was permitted to use it to create David, which is just it'll make you cry the first time you see it. It's so beautiful. And all I'm saying is, I think one of the snares that a lot of entrepreneurs fall into is they're so busy being productive that they're pushing 1,000 mediocrities out in the marketplace. I think it's much wiser to slow things down and push one masterwork into the world. All it takes is for one of your listeners or viewers to push one Michelangelo's David into the world to be iconic. All it takes is one Catcher in the Rye to sell 100 million copies of a book. All it takes is one Taj Mahal to go down in history, if that's important. All it takes is one iPhone to build Apple was recently a $3 trillion company. And so I think that discipline comes in the rest. I mean, all it takes, like, what if we rest for 10 years, read for 10 years? I know this is so disruptive, but we're learning and we're working on the craft, and we're, like 30 years of being anonymous. And then all of a sudden we bring it on with the Michelangelo's David, and we drop the mic and we take the rest of our lives off. It's one night.
Yeah, I like
so
this
having fun and resting and all that is good.
Yeah, and actually that was one of the big takeaways, which you would not expect from the Heroes Manifesto, just reading into the title, like, and also just feeling into what I've heard from you before in terms of the 5 a.m. club. And I, like, those that know Robin, but there is such a deep message of balance written through the thread of this book. It is like a deep currency that I found popping out again and again. It's like, can you feel the balance? Everything in balance, like finding a balance. You don't, like you said, hustle. There's this conversation, and one of the things that I fascinate the most about is when I'm on purpose, it's like who I'm being and who I'm becoming are intrinsically both equally as rewarding, where I'm not having to do any trades. It's this thing that lights me up like a Christmas tree. And that's what I just pray for everybody that tunes into the Inspired Evolution. And that's the coaching and the whole path. It's like, if I can be who I am, like right now, having this conversation with you, I'm having the best time of my life, right? Touch wood. And then who I'm becoming is potentially the ability to have all the wisdoms and insights and lessons that I'm learning from this conversation, and hoping to have more conversations such as this with you in the future as well. It's enabling that as well. It's incredible, right? And that is like a life on purpose, and just what it does for that, it just completely blows me away. And that is so different from a life of hustle and out of balance and just push, trying to go for many mediocre outcomes, and just trying to do something that you absolutely love and putting out that masterpiece that you're alluding to.
I totally hear you. I agree.
Robin, I am conscious of your time, but honestly, before I let you go, I just got to ask one last little question. I ask everybody that jumps on the show.
Sure.
It's the last question is inspired evolution. When you hear this phrase, what does it mean for potentially yourself, for humanity, for the planet, for life in general? What do you hear? What do you feel when you feel inspired evolution? What is your inspired evolution?
Well, what the phrase means to me, the name of the title of your podcast, it's just two words, as simple as that sounds. And it speaks to something incredibly important, which is, first of all, you cannot inspire the world if you're de-inspired yourself.
Mm.
So it's protect your inspiration and the sparkle in your eye at all costs. And the second part of it is evolution, which is NSI, never stop improving. You know, I was reading an online newspaper, and in the comments section, the poster was knocking self improvement, and it made me think. You know, first of all, I believe that person has a bias, but secondly, hasn't civilization advanced because of people who wanted to honor their promise? I mean, self improvement is one of the deepest instincts of the human heart. If we hear it. And so inspired evolution is, number one, protect your inspiration at all costs, especially in this very troubled yet still beautiful world that we live in. And then secondly, evolution, it's when it's easy, when it's hard, when it's sunny, when it's dark, when it's dangerous, when it's safe, keep on inspiring, keep on evolving.
Robin, thank you so much for sharing that. And honestly, thank you so much for your time, your presence, your energy here today. And I know it's not just today's conversation that informs this conversation that we've had. It is literally a lifetimes of work, which, again, just reminding you guys tuning into the podcast, please check out the book. Like, the Hero Manifesto is legitimately one of the best books I've ever read. For those of you, especially that are coaches, that are into self-improvement in a really big way, this is, without a doubt, Marcus Aurelius' Meditations for Self-Improvement in today's age. It is a Bible for people like yourself and myself. We can glean so much insights. It'll keep you going for years. You can pick it up at any point in time. There's so much to pick up from it. I will stop talking about it only after you go download it. Link is in the show notes below. Robin, thank you so much for doing this.
Pleasure, Amrit. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, give it a like, leave us a comment. And if you want to stay in tune for new episodes launching every Monday, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Stay inspired to evolve.